What's up, college football fans, and welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. I am your co host, Marcus. There's your other co host, Mason. We are going to be talking some West Virginia Mountaineers football today. We are on our quest to number one. We are counting it down until the beginning of college football season. We are basically just taking our top 35 teams that we feel have the best shot to affect the college football playoff, the national championship in 2024. And West Virginia, you are on the chopping block today. Mason, you ready to talk some West Virginia Mountaineers football?
Yeah, absolutely. We're 38 days away by the time this video releases from the college football season.
Mm,
Um, this is gonna be this is gonna be a huge season for every team. Such an impactful season, pivotal sort of moment here, and I cannot wait for this to start. I mean, we're almost a month away. I know that our Mountaineers fans are geared up and ready for another fun season. Had a great year last year, 8 wins in the regular season, and then a dominant performance against North Carolina in the Duke Mayo Bowl to end the year. And hey, I'm ready to talk some Mountaineer football and see kind of if you're drawing the same conclusions that I am about this team.
yeah, absolutely. And what we like to do is pull up the depth chart and go through position group by position group and put our 2 cents in. And we've been digging through all these teams getting ready for the season. West Virginia fans, we hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button. We're going to be talking Big 12 football all year long. We cover all of the Power 4 conferences in college football, and you will be talked about this year, and we hope that you'll come join our group. We do live shows throughout the season, game reactions, all that fun stuff. We have an absolute ball, and as Mason said, it's going to be one hell of a year. Um, let's add up the depth chart there, and we always start with the quarterback, Mason. So let's go ahead and start with the quarterback, Garrett Green, coming back. 2,406 yards, 16 TDs, and 4 interceptions last year. Um, from everything, I look. Admittedly, I didn't watch every West Virginia game last year, Mason. It was a season where it really started with the coach on the hot seat, right? Neil Brown was on the hot seat. It was some West Virginia faithful were ready to pull the trigger, right? And for all intents and purposes, it looked like it was going to be a down year. As you said, getting nine wins, I think that was a big get for this team, big confidence boost. And now you bring back your quarterback from last year. So Garrett Green, a kind of an all or nothing quarterback last year, right? It was either I'm throwing it behind the line of scrimmage or I'm throwing for a touchdown. And it worked. It worked. This is a guy that is really working on the middle part of the field this year. Um, the tight ends weren't really utilized in this offense a whole lot last year. Not much going in the middle of the field for this offense. What do you think about Garrett Green coming in as a senior? Obviously, the experience is welcomed at the quarterback position, no doubt. Um, but definitely some holes in his game that he needed to work on this offseason. And the coaches feel as though he's done that. And Neil Brown said at one point last year he's going to complete 50% of his passes, whether we throw it down the field or whether we throw it short.
Hmm.
So why don't we throw it down the field? Right? Makes a lot of sense. They're going to try and incorporate more of that middle of the field passing game between the 20s, between the hashes. They're going to try to do that more this year, but if it doesn't work, it's going to go back to plan A. What do you think about Garrett Green in this offense and where they're tracking for the 2024 season?
Yeah, I really like Garrett Green. I think that he is a bit of an underrated quarterback here in the Big 12. I think if he can take a step forward, become even better, obviously Mountaineers fans would love that. But ultimately, you mentioned it, 2,400 yards, 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, protected the ball pretty well last season for the Mountaineers, but just a 53% completion percentage. A lot of that has to do with the drop rate, a 10% drop rate on the team. That is awful. So having some better wide receiver play, I think, is going to go a long way for Garrett Green this season. But look, this is a dual threat guy. I mean, had 772 rushing yards last year and 13 touchdowns on the ground. So 29 touchdowns total. That's a pretty good little number for your quarterback. I think if the receiver if the receiving group takes a step forward and catches more balls or doesn't drop as many balls. I mean, Garrett Green's a potential 3,000 yard passer, 1,000 yard rusher. I mean, he has the tools to be a pretty dynamic and effective quarterback in both the pass and the run game. So I'm pretty high on them. I think, like you said, if they can incorporate the intermediate throws a little bit more and get Cole Taylor a little bit more involved as a tight end, I think that's going to go a long way in boosting that stat line for West Virginia and for Garrett Green.
Yeah, I think he's got a couple of pretty good running backs back behind him. We'll get to them in a second, but really, what's going to be a big key to the success, I think, of this offense is uh, the experience that you're returning on the offensive line. 5 out of 6 returning, out of your best, offensive linemen there. All 5 starters for this year have at least 400 snaps and 4+ starts last year. That's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
that's talk about experience. That probably not a better group, position group to have. Uh, you know, uh, Guys that have had tons of experience, right? That's going to go to a long, long way with this team this season. Um, what do you think about this offensive line group bringing all this experience back? I think this is going to be a pretty decent group, and should, I think, translate to a pretty strong year for Garrett Green.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of headlined by Wyatt Milam. You know, he's quite arguably the best player on this team in general. I think he's probably a second round draft pick at left tackle. Gave up no sacks last year, only 9 quarterback hurries. Um, Look, probably could have gone into the draft last year, but decided to come back. Probably pretty wise for an offensive lineman. But over 2,000 career snaps. I mean, brings a lot of experience. It's definitely the leader on this offensive line. And then at center, you know, and you got another leader with over 2,700 snaps. Only gave up 1 sack and 7 hurries last year in Brandon
Wow.
Yates. So pretty good, you know, 1-2 punch there on the offensive line. And you mentioned all the experience coming back. No player with less than 4 starts. And then they also bring in the transfer Xavier Bosley. I think he figures to play. There's going to be a little bit of competition at those other 3 positions as a whole, but I like what they have. I mean, you've got 6 guys that you know can play. It's just how they all mix up. You know, we'll have to wait and see. But definitely 2 really good offensive linemen there at center and left tackle for West Virginia.
Yeah, and I like these running backs as well, Mason. They're going to be running behind those big uglies up front. Jaheim White, 109 attempts last year, 842 yards. Um, he's kind of the smaller back, more of your, I would call him lightning, right? And then you've got your thunder, your CJ Donaldson. He's a much bigger, over 6 foot. I think it was right at 230 or 240. Big back, 171 attempts, 798 yards last year. So more of like the battering ram type. He had 11 touchdowns. I like the running back tandem pretty good here. You got a guy like Jalen Anderson who is a redshirt junior, bringing up that third string. You'll see all 3 of those guys rush the ball this year, but I think you're going to get a strong dose of Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson for sure. Um, what do you think about the running back room? I like the first 2 guys on this depth chart pretty good bit.
Yeah, I mean, you had almost 900 yards after contact between those 2 running backs. Really impressive. I mean, 842 yards for White, 7.7 yards per carry. That's very efficient, and 406 yards after contact, 32 missed tackles. If your offensive line is deficient, that's what you need, right? Is the missed tackles and yards after contact. C.J. Donaldson, 798 yards and 493 yards after contact. So maybe even a little bit more elusive. 23 missed tackles for him, but you've got a thumper in Donaldson that can also make you miss. He's a little bit shifty, and I really like the running back group. I think West Virginia has notoriously been a team that has had dynamic running back play throughout the years, and I think you've got another two-headed monster here for the Mountaineers.
Yeah, yeah, I really really do like that running back room. Last position group. In this case, I think we probably saved the least for last, and this is a group that I think has drawn the biggest concern and doubters, really throughout the years, Mason. There hasn't been a go to wide receiver on this team in a while, and just not a guy that was just the clear number one, our best versus your best. You know, they just don't they haven't had that. This team had the highest contested catch rate in all the Big 12 last year because all of the catches they made were contested.
Yeah.
There's little separation going on. So you bring in a guy like Jaden Bray, um, 30 receptions, 382 yards for Oklahoma State last year, a couple of touchdowns. I do think that is a nice addition. Not a guy with just like overwhelming, just heaping experience or anything. And then you bring in a guy like Justin Robinson. Both of those guys come in at the X position. Justin Robinson was a guy who played some football at Georgia. He didn't get a whole lot of snaps, did he, Mason? I don't think he got
Only
really
one
any.
season.
Yeah, yeah. So going to be interesting to see what his redshirt senior season. I feel like you just don't really know what you're getting with that guy. He's got the talent. He was a highly recruited guy, but not somebody that's really made their mark on the field yet. So I think at that X position, you bring in, your top three receivers are guys that are transfers you brought in from the transfer portal. So obviously there was a clear need there. Besides that, Traylon Ray, 12 receptions, 321 yards last year, 3 touchdowns. Rodney Gallagher, not much experience to speak of there. So still kind of an unanswered question, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of inexperience. You've got two,
Yeah.
based on this depth chart, you've got two true sophomores playing. And just not a ton of experience. I have a little bit more faith in Traylon Ray. He's a little bit more proven. Getting 300 plus yards as a true freshman, says a lot. But ultimately, I think that this team is going to be led. This unit is going to be led by Jaden Bray. Coming over, he's a big wide receiver. He's got the length, and he actually works really well vertically. And the coaching staff said, "Hey, this guy's different." Coming in this year in spring practice, that you could just tell that he carries himself differently. And so I do have some faith in Jaden Bray. If Garrett Green's going to be able to get him the football, that's another question. But he's had, Jaden Green's over a 46% completion percentage on passes 20 or more yards down the field. So I think that Jaden Bray, if he's able to get vertical, really complements Green a lot. So that could be a nice little 1-2 punch there, nice little combination for the quarterback to the X receiver. And then Justin Robinson, a ton of experience. Guy's been around, played at Georgia, played at Mississippi State. He's 6'4". He adds more size, but ultimately hasn't really had the career that the former top 150 overall player would have hoped to have had, which is why he finds himself at his third college football home. But yeah, you get a little bit more experience. Hopefully, you've got 4 receivers there that can go out and get the job done, and then maybe a couple more complementary pieces. But ultimately, when you have a lack of depth and a lack of experience in the wide receiver room, in order to get that passing attack going, sometimes you need to rely on the tight end, and that's where Cole Taylor comes in. I mentioned him earlier, but 6'7". He's a big target. Good, should be a good red zone threat. Had 21 first downs last year, and going to back to what I said about all the drops last season, this is a guy who only had 3 drops. So I think that he had 444 yards, 4 touchdowns last year. You got to get him a little bit more involved. I mean, those are pretty good numbers for a tight end, but when you're lacking in the wide receiver room, no better compliment for a quarterback than to be able to drop the ball over the middle to your tight end when those downfield threats just aren't there. So hopefully we see a little bit more of Cole Taylor. I think if he's able to be a little bit more involved, getting 3 or 4 catches a game even, then I think that this offense is going to take a big step forward.
Yeah, definitely need to utilize the tight ends, especially in the middle of the field. We talked about the issues, getting the ball to the middle of the field, and I think that it's going to be important to get the tight ends involved, so that you can definitely get the ball in the middle of the field against those linebackers. I think that that's going to be um, a big help. Let's jump over to the defense, Mason. Um, you know, this was not a great defense last year, and a lot of different categories. Um, there was some issues, and in all honesty, this year I think the biggest issue is going to be the secondary. Kind of a scary outlook on things right this second. You got, not that you don't have bodies. They've brought a lot of guys in through transfer portal, but it 6 defensive backs in from the portal. I mean, I just don't think you know what you're getting. Um, Last year, you had a couple of corners that were, I mean, really, honestly, it was the best case scenario. These guys played almost every snap, both of these corners. One of them ended up being an All American. He went from fifth best on his team at Minnesota, transfers over, and he's an All American. I mean, you can't get much luckier than that, honestly. So I think this defense is really going to rely on these linebackers and this defensive line, which defensive line I don't feel like they're deep enough to be an anchor necessarily, or a highlight of this defense necessarily. You do bring back Tyron Bradley in that linebacker core. I think that's a really big deal. Going to be playing what they call the spur position. I believe it was called something else last year, so they're changing the names of those positions. But um, all in all, Mason, I feel like this is kind of a incomplete on this defense. I feel like um, experts have been asked, West Virginia guys that follow the beat, do you think this defense is better this year than it was last year? I've heard no. That's what I've heard. I'm no X's and O's genius or anything like that. But it seems as though there's some holes on this defense, and got some work to do on that side of the ball. As you can see, that's where a lot of the transfers were brought in. Tons of depth pieces, guys that are going to be starting, especially in that secondary. What do you think about this defense going forward, Mason? It seems to me like it leaves a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough to find the playmakers on this defense, but one area that they're not lacking is at the safety position. I think Aubrey Burks might be the best defensive player on this team. Excuse me, Anthony Wilson is who I have highlighted for the safety position. 80 tackles, 1 interception, 5 pass breakups, had 10 run stops last year, so pretty versatile. But the last thing you want is for your safety on the furthest removed from the line of scrimmage position having the most production on your defense. That's not a good sign. So you'd like to see a lot better play from the defense there, but up front, I think it's really highlighted by Sean Martin. Playing defensive end, he had 21 quarterback hurries last year, 5 tackles for a loss, 1 sack. Pretty good numbers there, but he's not going to be able to do it on his own. One thing that is important to note is that there is a lot of experience on this defense. You know, outside of Ben Cutler, everybody's in their third year or later. So maybe that helps out a lot. But you know, you mentioned it. You got to have some depth, right? So the best way to build that depth is to go out first. The immediate need it has to be looked at. You have to look at the transfer portal, right? And they did that. I mean, you see on your screen there all of the highlighted in orange players are transfers, other than the freshmen on that far right column. But they go in, you know, and you add 9 players on the defensive side of the football. 6 of those come from or are playing in the secondary. Not a great sign, but it does show that they're at least attacking the best that they can the deficiencies on this defense. And then you add in 5 freshmen that are cracking the 3 deep. It's probably a pretty good sign there that, you know, maybe you hit on some freshmen there, and that can step in and step up for this defense. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be an offensive led team. Defense, we're just going to have to wait and see. You know, do these pieces really come together and mesh well? Didn't play terrible last year for the most part, and I would say, you know, you mentioned, is the team better on defense than they were last year? It's tough to say. I think it's probably pretty even, though. I think if you're getting the same defensive production that you got last season, then you feel pretty good about it. It's just going to look different. Where it was in the secondary that you had a lot of the help last year, I think maybe the middle linebackers kind of step in a little bit here and maybe play a little bit better than predicted.
Yep. Yep. We'll just have to see. I mean, anytime you get this many transfers in, you just have to see. But look, West Virginia wasn't expected to do a whole lot last year, and look what they did. So I think that, you know, we'll just kind of have to wait and see. The Big 12 is gonna be an absolute cluster this year. I think there's gonna be several teams right there at the top. Um, did you? Let's see. Let's see if we can get a schedule pulled up here. Um, there we go. Let's kind of jump through this, Mason, and take a look. You start off the season hot, big game, August 31st. I'll be tuned in, no doubt about it. And I know all you West Virginia fans will too. Um, August 31st, you got Penn State coming to your place. That's going to be a huge game, Mason. They're going to be a really, really tough game. A team that a lot of people would consider are going to be right there in the college football playoff contention. That is with Penn State. So that'll be interesting. And then you've got Wofford at home. You've got Pitt on the road, and then Kansas at home. Um, you know, pretty tough start to the season there, Mason. Pitt, you know, I wouldn't consider them to be a powerhouse or anything, but they will beat you if you don't show up and play some football, right? Um, I think you got one guaranteed win. I think you got a pretty probable win, and then a couple of toss ups in that first week, or a game maybe even I guess that you're projected to lose in Penn State. So um, I think if you can make sure that you at least start 2-2 or you know 3-1 in that first 4 game stretch, then I think that'll be a successful open of the season. Then you've got Oklahoma State on the road, Iowa State at home, Kansas State at home, Arizona. That's a tough stretch, Mason.
Yeah.
Woo! That's a tough stretch. I mean, as far as Big 12 goes, I mean, that's got to be one of I mean, the only thing you could do maybe is add Utah in there, make it a
Hmm.
little tougher, right? Um, and then you finish those last 4 games of the season on the road at Cincinnati, Baylor at home, UCF at home, and then Texas Tech on the road to end the season. Um, the this is a pretty tough schedule as far as Big 12 goes, right? I think this is pretty tough. You miss a bunch of the lower level teams like you know, Houston, you're missing out on. I would not consider Colorado to be a great team. You miss out on playing Colorado. Um, you know, the Arizona State, you miss out on. Um, so you're missing what I would consider to be some easy dubs this year by playing a pretty tough Big 12 schedule. What do you think about this thing? I hadn't counted up my wins and losses. I want to hear what you have to say first.
Yeah. Yeah, really tough Big 12 schedule here. I think, and we keep saying this offseason, this Big 12 is going to be one of the most entertaining conferences in college football. I think there's a lot of parity among these teams, and look, it doesn't help when you get the bronze medalist of the Big 10 over the past few years in Penn State to start the season off. They're going to be a playoff team this year. I fully believe that, and whether it's 12 or 4, it doesn't really matter. That's still a really good top tier sort of program at the end of the day in college football. And I've got that as a loss. I think that Penn State's defense is going to be way too good, even for a good West Virginia team. I think if you're going to look to kind of count your wins there, if you can put up 21, if you get 20 on Penn State, that's got to look pretty good for your offense, because that's going to be a really stingy defense for Penn State. So kind of count your wins where you can there. If you can, like I said, if you can get 20 points against Penn State, you're probably looking at a pretty good offensive season for the rest of the schedule there. Wofford and Pitt, got to win both of those games. If you want to go bowling, I think, as stingy as the schedule is, you've got to win those two games. Pitt is not going to be easy. We saw last year, really that was where people started paying attention to West Virginia, was in the Pitt game last year. Everybody's watching that game, and it was a barn burner. I mean, it was an absolute slobber knocker of a football game. Very fun to watch. I don't expect any different this year. But you've got to hope. You've got to hope that West Virginia is going to be able to get that win on the road, because then you run into, like you mentioned, the gauntlet of the schedule. Kansas is going to be really tough this year. I think that's going to be a loss even at home. Oklahoma State, again, going to be really tough. I think that's going to be a loss on the road. Iowa State, you could win that one. I still give the edge to Iowa State. Kansas State, I think, is they're my pick to win the Big 12 this year. I think that's going to be a really tough matchup. So that's a loss for me. Arizona, I think by this time in the season, Arizona is going to be looked at as very middle of the pack for the Big 12 in a game that you could absolutely go out and win. It is on the road, but Arizona not exactly a hostile environment, right? So maybe you end up winning that one. And really, the rest of the games, you're going to have a really good chance to win. You're probably not going to win the last 5, right? You got to hope you can go at least 3-2, but realistically, you'd like to go 4-1 on those last 5. To me, that's about the only way that you're going to end up going bowling, is if you win 4 out of the last 5. Maybe you can pull an upset against the Cyclones at home. That would be one to circle, but then again, got to win those first or 2 out of the first 3, really, in order to have a 6 or 7 win season. So I'm not projecting, obviously, an 8-win season like they had last year. I think it's going to be really tough to see them get to a bowl game this year, but 7 wins is certainly the ceiling for me.
That's I think they can get to 7. I think that's the number that you gotta be shooting for this West Virginia team. I don't think you're beating Penn State. Definitely will beat Wofford. Pitt is a toss-up rivalry game. One of the most underrated rivalry games in the nation every single
Mhm.
year. Love that game. And I think we always get it early in the year, so that's nice. I like a good early in the year rivalry game. I think that's awesome. And can propel a football team forward. You beat your rival in a game like that week 3, that can certainly propel you. So if West Virginia can get a win there, that'll be a big help. But then you got to turn around without a week off and play Kansas. So 2-2 out of those first 4 games for me. 2-2 out of the second set of 4 games. I think you can beat Iowa State and Arizona if things go right. And then I think that that last week, I think you could, or excuse me, those last 4 weeks, I think you could probably split those or maybe go 3-1.
Mhm.
So that would put you at 7-5 for the season, and that's what I'm going to put on the books. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. West Virginia fans or any college football fans that are tuning into this, you're a real one. You're checking in early in the season before the season even gets going. We want you to be part of our community. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. That's the best way to support a channel like this. We are doing it for the love of the game, folks. We just love college football as much as you do, and we hope that we can get more people in our community that are absolute football fanatics. Until next time, I am Marcus. That's Mason. We'll see you on the First and Long College Football channel.